Hello and welcome to Crossfire, the show that dives into the heart of global conflicts, where nations collide, alliances shift, and lives hang in the balance. Tonight, two explosive developments are rattling Europe and the world at large. As Ukraine loses significant ground in the Kursk region, Vladimir Putin issues a chilling threat to strike the United Kingdom, heightening fears of a wider war. Meanwhile, American defense firms are on high alert after reports of Russian sabotage targeting critical supply chains have surfaced, forcing the government to raise security to its highest levels. Ukraine is facing a dual threat, one on the battlefield and another in the digital realm. In the strategic Kursk Oblast, Ukrainian forces have lost more than 40% of the territory they had gained in recent months, as relentless Russian counterattacks have pushed them back. But the fight is far from just military. Russia is now ramping up cyber attacks against NATO nations, targeting critical infrastructure in an effort to destabilize Western support for Ukraine. Can Ukraine hold its ground, or will Russia's coordinated assault shift the balance of power? Our next report decodes this for you.
In the region of Kursk, once seen as a rare success for Ukraine's military, the tide has turned. Ukrainian forces have now lost more than 40% of the territory they secured during a surprise incursion into Russian-held land in early August. Ukraine initially gained control of about 1,376 square kilometers of Kursk Oblast. But as of November 23, sources in Ukraine's General Staff report that the area under Ukrainian control has shrunk to approximately 800 square kilometers. The cause? A relentless Russian counteroffensive that shows no signs of slowing. According to Ukrainian officials, Russian forces have bolstered their presence in the region, with nearly 60,000 troops stationed in Kursk and an estimated 11,000 North Korean soldiers now supporting the Russian side. As the conflict heats up, the Russian goal is clear: to recapture lost territory and secure a buffer zone along the Ukrainian border before political changes in the United States. As the territorial struggle rages on, Ukraine continues to face mounting pressure from Russia's eastern front, which has intensified in recent weeks, with airstrikes and missile attacks hitting Ukrainian cities. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has reiterated the urgent need for increased air defense systems to protect the nation's skies. And while the physical front lines of the war may be in Ukraine, the cyber front lines are being drawn much closer to home for NATO nations. A stark warning from the UK about Russia's preparations to launch a wave of cyber attacks aimed at destabilizing not only Ukraine but the security of NATO countries. UK government officials have cautioned that Russia is preparing to ramp up its cyber warfare tactics, targeting critical infrastructure, businesses, and government agencies across NATO members, including the United Kingdom. Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, is set to address the growing threat at the NATO Cyber Defense Conference next week, describing Russia's cyber attacks as a hidden war that could have devastating consequences. McFadden emphasized that Russia's cyber capabilities have evolved from simple data breaches to full-scale interference, warning that Moscow could turn the lights off for millions of people by targeting power grids, transportation systems, and financial networks. This type of cyber aggression is designed to destabilize economies and sow fear, much like Russia's physical military efforts against Ukraine. But with Russia's cyber threats and military pressure increasing, the question remains: how long can Ukraine continue to withstand the onslaught? This comes as Ukraine encountered one of the biggest drone strikes from Moscow, with 460 drone attacks within a week. And how will NATO adapt to defend against both kinetic and cyber warfare? With Russian forces pressing hard to regain lost territory in Kursk and cyber warfare now adding a dangerous new layer to the fight, the path ahead looks uncertain.
As the war in Ukraine escalates, so do the threats from Russia, not just on the battlefield, but in a dangerous new front targeting the companies that supply Ukrainian defense. US intelligence agencies are urging defense contractors to raise their security measures to the highest levels, following a series of sabotage attacks. So, is this part of a broader Russian strategy to weaken NATO supply chain?
As the conflict in Ukraine continues to escalate, so do the threats from Russia. Not only on the battlefield, but now targeting the very companies that supply weapons and support to Ukraine's defense efforts. In a new and urgent warning, US intelligence agencies are advising defense companies to enhance their security measures immediately. This follows a series of sabotage attacks damaging communication cables in the Baltic Sea, which intelligence officials are attributing to Russian operatives. The National Counterintelligence and Security Center has raised alarms about the increasing risks to US companies. These companies are not only supplying arms to Ukraine, but also manufacturing military products for other nations. Recent reports by US intelligence suggest that Russian-backed sabotage operations have targeted European defense companies and logistics hubs. This caused severe disruptions to supply chains and military readiness. According to US and European intelligence, these attacks are the work of criminal gangs hired by Russian officials. The objective? To weaken NATO's resolve and delay the West's support for Ukraine. This pattern of sabotage is being viewed as part of a broader strategy by Moscow to destabilize Western nations and disrupt their military efforts. As the war continues to rage, the West remains steadfast in its support of Ukraine. But these new threats from Russia are forcing defense companies, governments, and military leaders to rethink their security strategies. From cyber attacks to physical sabotage, the lines between traditional warfare and hybrid threats are becoming increasingly blurred. The latest warning comes at a time when both sides are preparing for a long and grueling winter campaign. As intelligence agencies urge US defense contractors to step up their defenses, the question remains: how far will Russia go to achieve its goals? And how will the West respond to this growing threat, both on the battlefield and behind the scenes?
The war in Ukraine is pushing Europe into a new era of conflict, one that could ripple far beyond its borders. As tensions soar, Nordic nations are launching massive war preparedness campaigns, while Poland becomes a key NATO stronghold, just miles from Russia's border. With Europe bracing for the unknown, the stakes have never been higher. How far will the conflict spread? What's next for global security?
The escalating tensions in Europe have set the stage for a new kind of conflict, one that could ripple far beyond Ukraine's borders. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has entered a perilous new phase, with far-reaching consequences not just for the nations directly involved, but for the entire security architecture of Europe and beyond. Fear is mounting, and military readiness is at the forefront of national agendas across the region. In the Nordic countries, anxiety has triggered massive war preparedness campaigns. Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark are taking unprecedented steps to ensure their citizens are ready for any emergency, from natural disasters to full-scale war. Take Sweden, for example. The Swedish government has taken the extraordinary step of mailing out millions of copies of a new pamphlet. The country has updated its Cold War-era civil defense booklet, now advising citizens to stockpile essentials like food, water, and medicines in case the worst happens. And it's not just Sweden. Finland, which shares a long border with Russia, has launched a comprehensive digital preparedness platform, providing citizens with resources on how to respond to a wide range of potential crises. Norway, too, is ensuring that its citizens are ready for whatever may come. In the wake of increasing military tensions in Eastern Europe, Norway has distributed millions of pamphlets offering advice on surviving extreme weather, natural disasters, and the potential for war. And Denmark, with its own emergency management initiatives, is focusing on how to help citizens survive crises of up to 3 days. Enough time to regroup, escape danger, or receive aid. There is a clear theme across the Nordic countries. It's not just about being ready for war, it's about surviving a new, unpredictable era of global instability. Meanwhile, just to the south, Poland is stepping into the international spotlight as a key player in NATO's defense strategy. The country has just inaugurated a crucial US missile defense base in the northern town of Rezykova, a mere 230 kilometers from Russia's border. What was once intended as a defensive measure against threats from the Middle East has now become a frontline asset in the fight against Russia's military expansion. And it's just not the military hardware that makes Rezykova so important. There are over 10,000 US troops currently stationed in Poland, a symbol of the growing military cooperation between Warsaw and Washington. The war in Ukraine has fundamentally changed the security landscape of Europe. With NATO nations preparing for potential conflict on their own soil, the world faces an uncertain and dangerous future.
The situation in West Asia is spiraling towards a devastating showdown. Iran has vowed a final attack in retaliation for Israel's airstrikes on its military sites. But the stakes have just been raised, as an Iranian official now claims that the country could have nuclear weapons within days. This is a threat that could shift the region's balance of power. With both sides on the brink, the world is left asking, how far will Iran go for revenge?
The situation in West Asia is reaching a critical point. After months of escalating attacks, both sides are now preparing for what could be a devastating showdown. Iran's senior leadership has made a chilling announcement. Tehran is planning a final attack in response to Israel's recent military actions, which included targeted airstrikes on Iranian military sites. As the two nations continue their tit-for-tat strikes, tensions have soared after Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has vowed to deliver a crushing response to both Israel and the United States. But now, an even more alarming development is emerging. Mohammad Javad Larijani, a trusted aide of Iran's Khamenei, has dropped an unexpected bombshell. Larijani has suggested that the country could soon possess nuclear weapons, potentially within days. This revelation has sparked international concern as it raises the stakes for not only Israel but for global security. Larijani, who oversees Iran's Institute of Basic Sciences, suggested that Western efforts to curb Iran's nuclear ambition have been misguided, leaving many to wonder if Tehran's nuclear capabilities could be advanced faster than anticipated. This potential shift in military strategy is something that could radically change the balance of power in the region and the world. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic front, the US is trying to mediate a ceasefire in a separate but equally tense conflict. US envoy Amos Hochstein has met with Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz. This is part of ongoing efforts to secure a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah group. Even as these talks take place, the shadow of Iran's looming threat looms large. As the violence spills over from Gaza to Lebanon and now potentially to a broader regional conflict, the question remains: how far is Iran willing to go in its pursuit of retaliation? How far is Iran willing to go in its pursuit of retaliation? And how will Israel respond? With both nations preparing for the worst, West Asia is teetering on the edge of an ever larger conflict that could have ramifications far beyond the region.
And with that, it's time to wrap up this edition of Crossfire. Thank you so much for joining us on India Today Global.